Dan Williamson, first time appearance on the Mind of Mansion. Welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be on here. It's been looking forward to this one for a long time.
PlayerProfiler's own Dan Williamson. You're working with Theo in the content department. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm doing kind of a little bit of everything. I'm working with Bradley Stalder on the Stack Hunters podcast, and pretty much anytime I'm around, I'm on with him. Done some guest appearances on Dynasty Roundtable, Dynasty Life, Dynasty Warzone, putting out a couple articles a month, helping out Theo with some of the ranking stuff and just kind of trying to fine tune and tweak them. And of course, contributing to the rookie guide and the draft guide as well. So it keeps me busy, Matt. It keeps me busy.
You're going to be heavily featured in the world famous draft kit. It will be released soon. It's coming up. Don't worry. The world famous draft kit is coming soon. It will be coming out soon. Soon. And Dan Williamson will be a big part of it. So you're a big player. You're doing a lot of best ball with Bradley on the Stack Hunter show, but also high stakes. That's what you're most known for. How many teams do you plan to draft across best ball, across high stakes? How many total teams do you think you'll draft this year?
I mean, I think I'll be at about 40 high stakes redraft managed leagues. I've got about 16 dynasty leagues. I'll have probably over 100 FFPC best balls, and I'll have definitely over 100 underdog best balls. So pretty wide portfolio. I mean, there are people who draft a way more underdog than I do, but I try to keep things balanced out between the sites that I like.
Now, it's funny because Underdog and the FFPC, those happen to be the two big sponsors of this particular program, and today we are sponsored by the FFPC, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So besides quarterback, okay, because quarterback ADPs in best ball, they just go much earlier because you have to draft multiple, right? Now, in a high-stakes league, I've noticed that there's a lot more people that will actually draft multiple quarterbacks in high stakes than in a traditional seasonal league. You go a lot of people just going one quarterback, but in best ball, it's critical to stack, and so then it drives up the demand even more for quarterback, and then there's people that are going to draft three quarterbacks. So generally speaking, quarterback ADPs are a couple rounds ahead of in best ball, ahead of the high-stakes ADPs. But what else? What's another ADP differential that you see, whether it be particular types of players, particular positions, where there is a distinct difference between the best ball ADPs and the high-stakes ADPs?
Right. So, I mean, I think there's a couple things. First off, I kind of think of it as redraft or best ball rather than high stakes or best ball, because in high stakes,
that's what I mean. You're looking, the redraft versus the best ball.
You're looking at within the redraft, you're looking at contest leagues, that are like the FFPC main event, that aren't best ball. They are managed leagues, but they're still a contest. And then you're looking at standalone leagues. And so there's, kind of different variations of how you want to draft through those. But basically, all the redraft ones are roughly the same. Your draft is just your starting point in redraft. And the ability to change the roster over the course of the season really adds flexibility to how you draft. Like, I can open up with a 5X wide receivers and then draft like 10 running backs and never come back to wide receiver, because I know I can always pick up a startable wide receiver on the waiver wire if I need to on any given week, right? So I can really, if I want to go heavy wide receiver to open, I can just stack and stack and stack with running backs and just have lottery ticket after lottery ticket after lottery ticket, and then wait and see by the time the season opens which ones are, throwaways and which ones aren't.
So redraft, you're going to see the handcuff running backs go earlier, particularly as the stakes go up. More people, the more sophisticated the players, the more they're going to be interested in just backloading their bench with handcuff running backs, where in best ball, you're backloading your bench with wide receivers. So the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, they go earlier in best ball. The running backs typically go earlier in high stakes. And at the FFPC, because it's tight end premium, you see the tight ends going earlier. It's actually funny because you draft multiple tight ends in best ball typically, and so you see the best ball tight end ADPs. They go a little bit earlier, and then the FFPC, because it's tight end premium, is like hold my beer.
Yes, exactly.
Right, we're gonna take tight ends even earlier.
Right, exactly. And so the tight ends, depending on whether you're going FFPC or underdog, obviously that's a whole different story either way. The other thing that I think is really important is that floor matters a bit more with redraft, and especially if you're talking about a confined league, like you just have 11 other people to beat, rather than a contest league like the FFPC main event, where you have thousands of people to beat. Right. So when you have thousands to beat, then you run it a little bit more like you would run a best ball, because again, it's a contest. But when it's not that contest, when you just have 11 other people to beat, floor definitely matters a little bit more. You don't have to reach for the stars all the time, because you don't have to go up against that one super team. You have a little bit of control over what everybody else in your draft is picking, because you get to pick players from it. Whereas in these contest leagues, that all the leagues that I'm not in, I have no control over what anyone's drafting. So somebody can end up with a super team. So I have to try to compete against that. So, and the other thing is in redraft, the late round wide receivers are a crapshoot, and the late round running backs are more often binary, right? Like when you're trying to decide, should I start, Darnell Mooney? I don't know. He could give you 3, he could give you 5, he could give you 19 or 20. It's hard to say. But with a guy like Kamani Vidal, I pretty much know whether to start him or not, because either he's probably starting for the Chargers, in which case I'm starting him, or he has a major role with the Chargers, or if he doesn't, then I'm looking somewhere else. So to me, it's a little bit easier in the redraft to go wide receiver heavy early, running back heavy late, because of the fact that the running backs are so binary. So it's an easier decision. What I hate is, when you're doing robust RB and then you have 7 wide receivers that all look identical, and I'm like, okay, I got to pick 2 of these guys, and I'm always picking the wrong 2, because nobody can pick players that well.
Right. That's really why robust RB has gone out of fashion, because enough people have been in this situation where they're like, well, I don't know who to start at wide receiver. This is really frustrating. Right.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, hey, congratulations. You've got a 25-point wide receiver this week. Go ahead and pick out which one it was. Like, oh,
exactly.
I don't know. Yeah. So that's the whole thing is, great job. You got the right wide receivers. That's why the better in best ball is actually real. Like, it's clearly become a cliche, but it's real. And especially when you're in a tournament setting, even in a high stakes tournament where you're actually, setting your lineup every week, you're still going to be more likely to draft that higher upside wide receiver in the later rounds than you would,
yes,
a running back, like a high floor running back, like you're talking about. And you're going to be more focused on stacking in a high stakes tournament than a single, 12-team league. So those are the big differences, man. Those are the big differences. And yeah, it's why in those, if you're going to be setting your lineup every week, you might as well spend the capital up on the wide receivers so you know who the fuck to start.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're up at the top of the board in a shootout and you're having to make these lineup decisions on wide receivers that, if you thought the pressure was on during the regular season to get it right, oh man, it's insane once you get up, and you're on that final week or two, and and every single decision matters.
Do you remember any of these from last year? I'm not asking you to go back years, but do you remember any of these from last year where you were making decisions between 2 wide receivers and it was excruciating?
I actually, this is going to go totally counter to my point, but I had one team where I had 4 great running backs, and the format only allowed me to start 3 at any one time. So I was constantly in fear of picking the wrong running back there. I think I had Achan, I had Kyren Williams, I had Barkley, and I had somebody else. I forget who. But And the same thing, was happening at wide receiver. Only those particular teams that had the late round wide receivers, they weren't doing as well. So it was a little bit less, in that particular instance, it was a little bit less critical as to who I started. The one team that went the farthest, my starting lineup almost set itself pretty much every week. It was, I was just deciding between like two wide receivers, and they were both scoring about the same, so it didn't really matter either way.
Yeah, whenever you're making all these decisions, deciding between quarterbacks, deciding between running backs, deciding between receivers every week, and you're making do, right? You're juking, right? You're jabbing, right? But at the end of the day, you realize, okay, this team's going to make the playoffs just because I'm going to grind it out and make the playoffs. But one of these weeks, I'm done. Like one of these weeks, I can manufacture enough wins to get into the playoffs, but this team's not going to make it. We all know it. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of my effort, but it's not going to make it there. It's just not going to happen. When you think about the high floor running back, you talked about the high floor running back vis-a-vis the high upside wide receiver. Who is the quintessential high floor running back?
The quintessential high floor running back is probably like a David Montgomery, and I'm specifically picking somebody with almost no ceiling either, and because the thing is, if they've got a high floor and they've got a high ceiling, then of course you run on them. But it's the guys who just don't really have that ceiling attached to them and their high floor. Then if you're in a managed league, well, maybe if they're cheap enough, but if you're in a contest league, no, thank you. I don't need floor that much. I need ceiling.
David Montgomery in tournaments, not for Dan Williamson. I like it. Schedule came out a few weeks ago. Now, because you play in all the formats, Week 17 matters a lot on Underdog, for example. Is there anything you looked at when you looked at the schedule and you thought, "Oh, this is interesting. This is kind of cool. I'm liking this little thing, and no one's talking about it."
Right. Yeah. Because, one thing that everybody seems to be in on, Houston, Baltimore, right? To me, what if the Ravens are a really bad matchup for the shootout weeks? That could be tough. I mean, they've got a really good defense. They absolutely throttled San Francisco last year, the only game where San Francisco failed to score well. And, as a matter of fact, that also took out one of my teams, my best team in a particular contest league. I won the regular season, had the most points, so got a nice little prize for that, but it was like, $1,700. And of course the overall was $250,000. Right. And I'm rolling along, and then San Francisco comes up, and I had this San Francisco super stack. And then, of course, they run into Baltimore, and they sucked. And that took me totally out of the running for the $250,000. But had you put that week anywhere else in the season during the regular season and swapped out pretty much any other week with it, I'd have won the whole thing. It was just the bad timing of playing Baltimore during the shootout.
So Baltimore used their first-round pick on a cornerback, their third-round pick on an edge rusher, right?
Right.
Which is a great use of capital. Late first round, take a corner there. Then you take an athletic guy with burst at edge in the third round. This is what they do. This is what Baltimore does every year. That's why their team is what it is. That's why their defense is always in the top half of the league. Unless there's, they've had years where their secondary is ravaged by injuries, but that happens. So yeah, that's right. That's a dangerous game to play if you're going to have, in the matchup you're trying to stack the most. If one of those teams is a good defense, scary.
Yeah, it's really tough. And with the Ravens, they did lose their defensive coordinator, so baby. But you also know that John Harbaugh is always going to have a good defensive team, like you said, and they were restocking through the draft and everything else. So yeah, I worry about that one a lot. I don't love the shootout schedules either for Pittsburgh, because they've got Philly, Baltimore, and KC. And KC has a sneaky good defense. Houston, who we just mentioned, they've got Miami, KC, and Baltimore, so they've got two really tough ones in there. So those are ones that I'm a little bit leery of. As far as ones that I'm looking at, the Packers in Minnesota. That's a ridiculously easy pair of teams to stack. You can do 100 different variations stacking these, because they have so many guys available in the mid round. And then you look at they play each other in week 17, so it's a really nice final week. And then Green Bay has Seattle and New Orleans, and Minnesota has Chicago and Seattle for their week 15 and 16 opponents. So, those aren't defenses that really scare me at all.
Falcons, Commanders, I like, and Cardinals, Rams, I like a lot. Because we know the Rams defense is going to be bad. Right? It's going to be one of the worst defenses in the league. Cardinals defense, the Cardinals been investing in offense more than their defense, so maybe an injury or two to the Cardinals defense. This could be two of the worst defenses in the league facing off. Falcons and Commanders both have shiny new quarterbacks with lots of skill position talent. That's interesting to me. Weather in Washington, not really a concern. Weather in Los Angeles, not a concern. So yeah, there's a lot of great matchups. Packers, Vikings, that's a good one. So I'll bring you in here.
Bay.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Green Bay a little bit more. So we'll get into Green Bay. We like to ask our guests about Green Bay. Green Bay's a very intriguing team for fantasy. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's just so many options. A lot of different
What about the backfield? Would you consider Josh Jacobs to be a high floor running back, or do you think he has an underappreciated ceiling?
I think he's a high floor running back. I do worry a lot about the tendency of Green Bay to go with a split backfield, and they're talking that way already. And with Josh Jacobs, I don't think you necessarily want to overwork him at this point in his career anyway.
That's right. You hear that, right? You hear that?
I do hear that.
That's cool. It's all happening. It's all happening, Dan.
Yes.
It's all happening. The First Minded Mansion Show.
Bring it.
Love and life. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program, the GOAT of the GOAT District. And he's been playing fantasy for over 35 years. We're very proud to have one of the OGs of high stakes. He's now one of the top content creators out there at PlayerProfiler.com with the Stack Hunters and Bradley Stalder. Here with me today, it is Dan Williamson. Talk to me.
Man, with an intro like that, I mean, I feel like I could run through a brick wall right now. Let's go, Matt. Let's go.
Let's go, Dan. Let's go.
Let's draft some teams. Come on. What are we waiting for?
Well, let's start with the first round. How will we do that? Let's start with the first round. Talk to us about these guys with the first round ADPs. It's not sleepers. I get it. It's not, under the radar, digging into the metrics. These are first round picks everybody knows about. Okay, fine. But there must be one guy that you're drafting the most of who's going in the first round, right?
Yeah, and for me, that's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's just in such a great spot. I look at him as he's really discount CeeDee Lamb. He's a CeeDee Lamb that you can get in the back half of the first round instead of having to be right up at the front. He's in a great offense. There's really zero questions about his role. He was a wide receiver 56% of the time last week. And he had 7 weeks of 23 or more points last year. So that's huge. I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for out of your first round pick.
Yeah, I mean that he's right there. Him and Garrett Wilson. I mean, these are guys that are just easy smashes at the end of the first round. Now, the guy that I don't get any of really is Christian McCaffrey, and I want some more of him. But I prefer CeeDee Lamb. Right, I think it's okay. Right, I prefer it's okay to prefer CeeDee Lamb. I think that's all right. And then if you're going to do that, if you're going to make that choice, you're probably not going to get a lot of McCaffrey, and then I'd just as soon have Bijan anyway. Right? So who's the one guy in the first round you're not getting any of for whatever reason?
So the one I'm probably more actively dodging around a little bit is Jamar Chase, and I know that that's hard for you to hear, Matt. I know it is, but
Yeah.
he's only been a wide receiver one 36% of the time between 2022 and 2023. Now we'll give him a little bit of credit, that he had to work, without Joe Burrow for the last half of the year last year. But on the other hand, Burrow's missed games before. Chase has missed games before. I think he should be priced more like AJB. AJ Brown back of the first round, sometimes slips into the early second. That's more where I see Chase. When you've got to take him, basically in the middle, if you don't have Chase by like pick 6, pick 7, you're probably not getting him. And that's just too rich for me.
He did have a 52-point week last year.
He did, yes. And, and for best ball, I do like him a little bit better than for managed leagues, for that reason, because you can get that big spike. But he has too many games that aren't spikes compared to the other guys in the first round.
I think the team mailed it in without Joe Burrow. End of the year, 5.9 fantasy points, 10.4, 7.1, 5.9. And he didn't have Browning, was that his name? Was that
Yeah.
or was Browning even the quarterback at the end of the year?
He was, but
he was. Okay, so at least
yeah.
they were able to maintain some continuity at quarterback after Burrow went down.
Yeah, it was not the worst situation at quarterback, but they were definitely hiding him whenever they could. Chase did have a couple good games with Browning as well. But it's also concerning to me that even in 2022, 41% of the time, Chase was getting a wide receiver 1 week, which is still low for the first round draft picks. You want somebody who's getting up over 50% for sure.
Now, prior to this year, CeeDee Lamb was more of a projection, right? Just like Garrett Wilson now is a projection. But it's like, hey, the situation for this guy is going to get better. The target share is there, right? The playmaking skills are there. We're going to go ahead and vault CeeDee Lamb into the first round, even though we haven't seen it before. And so, that's why, for example, with a Garrett Wilson, I'm willing to go there, even though when you look at just, historic wide receiver 1 weeks, he doesn't have that. But he had even worse quarterback play than Jamar Chase. And now you're getting a guy like Jamar Chase at the end of the first, early second round, similar to with the A.J. Brown situation you talked about.
Right. Yeah. With Wilson, and the thing is, he's got a better backup situation this year. He's got Tyrod Taylor, who is at least competent at quarterback rather than being, Zach Wilson, which is kind of his own special kind of quarterback. And with Aaron Rodgers, or Garrett Wilson, you're still buying the health of Aaron Rodgers to a certain extent. But at least if something happens to Rodgers again, Tyrod is going to be able to hold the fort together a little better.
Very good point. You're the first one to make that point. I think it's a great point. So as you go through the first round, you're going to have some of these guys, right? I'm going to have some McCaffrey. Thank God, I want him, right? I want guys in the first round. You want first round talents. At what point, though, especially in high stakes, when you feel like you want to be careful not to let someone beat you? At what point, second round, third round, do you start to encounter players that you're simply not drafting? You're refusing to draft any of these guys.
It's definitely happening, even, or I don't know about 0%, but I get pretty low on a couple players, even in the second, third round. But overall, it's one of those places where it pays to be a little bit humble, and you don't want to be at absolute zero on like these first 3 rounds.
Right.
You want to have like at least a small percentage. Even if you feel pretty strongly that this guy's probably a fade, I've been wrong often enough. We've all been wrong often enough that, we just have to consider, we should have a little bit sprinkled in.
Who was it last year that you were fading that you wish you hadn't as hard?
God. Oh, I'm
Second
trying to
round,
think.
third round.
I was pretty out on Devontae Adams. I was pretty far out on. Well, Drake London wasn't going that way. Trying to think who else was going in the second.
Sounds like you had a pretty good year.
Derrick Henry, I was pretty far out on as well.
So you had a good year then.
Yeah, I did have a very good year.
Sounds like you had a great year, man. All right, so at what point, is it fourth round? Who's the first guy that you're like, okay, I'm going to have 0 of this dude?
Oh, man, it's so hard to remember last year's ADP.
No, this year.
Oh, this year.
No, we're talking about this year, man. You're going down the board and you're like, hey, this guy, no, none.
No. This year, I would say the first guy that I'm probably almost completely out on is Kyren Williams.
Was that before the draft?
That was after the draft.
After the draft,
right? Before the draft, I was low on him. He was one of those people I was going light on, but
that was the humble factor.
Right.
That was the humble factor where you're like, hey, we saw it last year, and if they really commit to this guy this year, like I can't put myself in that position to be totally out on a guy like that. I need to have a little bit. And as soon as they draft Blake Corum, then the risk of him running you over goes down by a lot.
Yeah. And even then, I still probably wouldn't be completely out. I would be drafting very few teams with Kyren, but when all of a sudden now we're talking about the foot issues as well. He's on my do not draft list for right now because of that, and if maybe he comes back to training camp, maybe his foot's fine, maybe he's clearly the lead guy, and then maybe I'm buying back in a little bit.
Just so we're clear, so everybody knows this, we bring people on the Minded Mansion from all over the place, right? We bring them out from all different services, football guys, fantasy pros, you name it, okay? As well as people that write articles and do rankings at PlayerProfiler. And whether it's someone at PlayerProfiler or not, it's not like I have an agenda that I'm only bringing on people that I know are cool on Kyren Williams. And there's certainly no message from the top from me that's telling people, hey, everybody, we got to make sure we crush Kyren Williams in our rankings or in our articles. You can validate that doesn't happen. This is just a whole bunch of smart people that have all decided that this guy should not be drafted.
Right, exactly. And if you want confirmation on that, you can pretty much count on you've had Nelson Sousa on the podcast before.
Yes. Yeah.
And his fade list is legendary. And I could pretty much guarantee you that Kyren Williams is going to be on his fade list because of the fact that he came from out of nowhere last year and all of a sudden he's being super highly drafted this year. When Nelson sees a running back like that, that's a guy is going to be on his fade list 100% of the time. And how many times have you and Nelson talked this offseason? Zero.
I haven't talked to him this season. No,
and
I haven't.
You just came to the same conclusion because you're both smart guys. You both understand how the game is played.
But there's no agenda. There's no anti-Kyren Williams agenda, okay? No. It's just at some point, you all as fantasy gamers need to decide, are you going to stick with the wisdom of the crowds and continue to draft this guy just because, ADP? Or are you going to take a stand and say, no, with this particular player, he's in the center of the Venn diagram of risk, and there's been enough people that have played enough fantasy over the years that have seen this time and time and time again. They've seen this movie so many times that, okay, that's the one guy I'm going to scratch off my list. Give us a couple more guys that beyond Kyren you're scratching off. You're not drafting at all.
So we talked about one, David Montgomery. And again, he's going before running backs with a similar floor and much better ceilings. In the same 7th round, you can have David Montgomery, who is going up against Jahmyr Gibbs, who is going to, I'm sure, take more work this year. Or you can have Aaron Jones, lead back for the Minnesota Vikings, fits him like a glove. Zamir White, they drafted almost no competition for him whatsoever. DeAndre Swift. in that nice, exciting Chicago offense. All these guys have way more ceiling than David Montgomery. It's possible for any of them to fail. It's possible for any player to fail. But
well, I think
David
it's likely
Montgomery
that
is
DeAndre
not
Swift. I think it's more likely than not that DeAndre Swift will fail, but no one would argue with his ceiling. The ceiling is not up for dispute, right?
Yes.
So that's it. That's it.
Yep,
There's plenty of guys that you can get late. Like Zamir White's perfect. Zamir White has a high floor in that he's going to get a lot of touches. He's going to score touchdowns. And the ceiling is going to come from the number of breakaway runs. And he is faster, significantly faster than David Montgomery. And it's not like the Raiders' offense is so many worlds ahead of the Lions' offense. Certainly, yes, the Lions have a better offense. But when you go player by player down this Raiders roster, you start to realize, oh, this team's going to score a lot of points. This team's underrated. There's a lot of good fantasy assets on this team.
Yep. You're definitely right. And, and I think that Zamir White has a chance to carve out a big chunk of that role as a running back there. I see, Alexander Madison was like the perfect free agent signing for Zamir White truthers because, Madison he has no juice whatsoever. Madison is a dried husk of a running back, even though he's not that old. He was dried up when he started. So he's got no juice. Now you've got Dylan Lobb, who, you got to worry about him a little bit. But, Zamir White can definitely handle enough of the pass catching role. How fast are they going to run that rookie in there? I think Labe is definitely an interesting guy to draft as the anti-Zamir White thesis. But I'm going to have a bunch of Zamir White on my teams.
And my thing with Zamir White is he's being drafted like he's not going to catch any passes.
Right.
The projection that aligns with his ADP suggests no catches. He's going to catch 30 passes just with dump-offs. He's going to
totally.
Think about how few that is. 30 passes is less than 1.5 catches a game.
Yeah,
He's going to catch 30
exactly.
passes. And some of them will be breakaways for touchdowns.
Yep. And he was a good college running back. He's got the physical traits we're looking for. This is the kind of guy that you want to draft.
Absolutely.
These are the players that you're looking for.
So I mentioned DeAndre Swift. I don't love that nobody likes him in the NFL. I think that that's a red flag. That would be my reason to not draft him. But he's not being drafted high enough to put him on a do not draft list. Like if DeAndre Swift was going where like the public love, I was impressed with fantasy gamers and how quickly they turned on DeAndre Swift. In years past, he would have been posted up in those earlier rounds just based on his talent profile. And there's been a coming to Jesus on these guys that don't care about the sport and don't work off the field and alienate coaches and teammates. Those guys don't get the same benefit of the doubt in fantasy that they used to. And so you're seeing them, they fall, and then you could say, well, he's probably got maybe a year left where, there's enough faith in him. You're always going to find, if you're, still on your rookie deal, you're always going to find some team that's willing to take, one more shot, like one last job, right? And that happens to be the Bears this year. So how do you see that backfield shaking out? How do you see DeAndre Swift's role, his opportunity share? Who's going to end up stepping up behind him? What do you think?
Is this the point where I tell you that I'm in on Swift big time?
I'm waiting. I think that this is he's an interesting guy.
He really is. And, I think there's a little bit of narrative with the, doesn't practice, he wore out his welcome in Detroit for sure. In Philly, what happened wasn't necessarily so much him wearing out his welcome is the offense just not using him to his best abilities, and also the offense just completely cratering around him. Early on in the season, they were using him well, except for the fact that, a running back like DeAndre Swift, you will always want to see a lot of targets, and Philadelphia just doesn't throw to the running back enough. I think that Chicago will. They didn't use him that much around the goal line because you got, Jalen Hurts and his 15 tush pushes. So Caleb runs just enough, but not too much. You've got the opportunity in Chicago. Chicago went out right away. That was like the first free agent signing of the whole free agent period. They were like, we want this guy. We're in on him.
He's only 25 years old.
25 years old. He's versatile. He got paid. I look at him honestly as he's kind of a discount Jahmyr Gibbs because he can run that same role in that offense. They can have Roschon. They can have Khalil Herbert take on some of those, the grunt work carries that you really don't want your starting running back getting anyway. You want to save him for the higher leverage situations. And if that's how they use Swift, is in those high leverage situations on an offense that is as good as we think Chicago might be, and I understand why Swift is priced where he is, because I just said a lot of words that, go if.
I mean, man, I don't think that's right. I don't understand on Underdog. I know Underdog, we talked about this at the beginning. Wide receivers get juiced up, quarterbacks get juiced up, even tight ends get juiced up. I get it. I totally get it. It's the discount bin across the board for running backs. No one wants to draft a running back. You draft a running back on Underdog, get made fun of. I get it. But player 86, slot 86,
and it's the same elsewhere too. FFPC,
what?
he's getting ignored. Other sites I play on, he's getting ignored. Swift is cheap, and I know several high stakes players that are in on him big time.
As they should. The guy got $15 million guaranteed.
Right.
For a running back, that's a massive deal. He's still only 25 years old. I don't hate players. I hate ADPs. I don't believe that he is going to be an NFL running back at age 30. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay? I don't think he has the passion. But at age 25, it's not like he's lost any of the fast twitch muscle fiber. It's not like he's lost or forgotten how to play football. Okay? They're going to have him out there. They're paying him to go do what DeAndre Swift does, and he's going to catch more passes this year. And if he has fewer carries, he had a lot of carries. He was top 12 in carries last year. If he has fewer carries and it goes to Roschon Johnson, that's great too. You can draft Roschon Johnson. Who cares?
Yes,
would you draft, given that their ADPs are so late, would you draft Swift and Johnson on the same team?
You definitely can, and that's probably something that I'd look to do in managed leagues because of the fact that you're having to make those starting decisions. And especially in a standalone league, where I'm only trying to beat 11 other people, it makes all the sense in the world. I do like Khalil Herbert just a little bit better than Roschon, just because of the fact that he's even cheaper. He is talented, and there's a possibility they could end up trading him off. I mean, right. What if Khalil Herbert ends up in Dallas, or what if he ends up somewhere where there was a running back injury, and this team is shopping around for a cheap running back, and if Chicago says, "Hey, we're good with Swift, we're good with Roschon, we really don't need Herbert, we can get by with a lesser third string backup," they'll trade him off, and he won't be expensive, so these teams that are, looking to make the playoffs, they're going to want to grab him. That's probably a good offense that he's going to. So yeah, I like Khalil Herbert a lot at his price, just because of the different possibilities that he has. But as far as like the pure handcuff, I think it's going to be Roschon.
Yeah, that's why you're showing a pair, but you also have a straight draw. Right? Isn't that Khalil Herbert?
That's exactly how you play it.
Yeah, that's how you play it, dude. I love it. What about the passing game with the Bears? The passing game's interesting too.
Yeah, the passing game is murky to me. I mean, I'll be honest, Matt. I'm not real confident on any takes on the Bears passing game right now until we see some training camp. There's talent off the charts, but it could be hard to predict week to week. I mean, I want to be in on these guys. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that.
I think you should be in. I think you should. Yeah, I think you just make a decision that Caleb Williams is going to be good, and then all those uncertainties sort of fall away.
Yeah, if he's good, it's going to be nice. In the again, in the managed leagues, it's going to be tough from week to week probably to know. DJ Moore, is it going to be his week? Is it going to be Slayer? Is it going to be Odunze? I don't know. But in Bestball, you don't have to worry about any of that. You just draft them and forget them. Right. Komet to me is the clearest fade. Reasons being, number one, obviously he's got, 3 great wide receivers to compete against, which is tough enough already. And then you look at who's their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, who was responsible for the giant 3-headed mess at tight end in Seattle. I mean, it was just gross beyond gross last year. And they picked up Gerald Everett. So, you got to wonder if it's going to get gross at tight end again in Chicago.
Well, I asked you for 3 do not draft players, and so far you've rounded it out. You have Kyren Williams. Okay. You've got Cole Kmet, right? And David Montgomery. There you go. There's your do not draft list. Now, in terms of teams I like, right, Chicago is probably one of the top 5 teams that I'm just drafting players from. I just want to source talent from the backfield, the passing game, pretty much everyone except Kmet. I love Washington. Love most of their players, even Jahan Dotson. Why not? Again, the ADP is right on Jahan Dotson. When the ADP is right, some years it's only 1 year. You get one window where the ADP is right. This is the 1 year where DeAndre Swift's ADP is right. This is the year where Jahan Dotson's ADP is right. Tampa, Godwin's ADP is usually right. It's usually a great time to get him. Green Bay, there's a lot of ambiguity with that target distribution there. We talked about Las Vegas being a great source of ADP value. So that's my top 5. Is there anyone that you think should join that top 5, that you would add to that top 5 of teams where there's just a ton of value to be had?
Yeah, I'll throw in. These are more like position groups specifically, except for one team. The Chargers wide receivers. I think there's a good amount of value to be had there because you know what? Somebody has got to catch the ball. Oh, yeah. And it's not like they're going to throw it, 3 times a game. They're not going to throw it much. I know that, but everybody's super cheap. So why not be taking your chances? Because somebody is going to step up there. Lad McConkey is by far the most expensive one. I like Josh Palmer a lot because he is so much cheaper and he's already got the rapport with Justin Herbert. So, to me, that's an easy one.
One of my favorite comps on Player Profiler is Josh Palmer to Jacoby Jones. Remember Jacoby Jones?
Oh, yeah.
That was a guy that would give you spike weeks.
Yes, exactly. That's what we're looking for. So, yeah, why not? Yeah, and then I think the Kansas City wide receivers are a little bit of a value just because there's so much uncertainty there. Is Rashee Rice going to play? Is he not going to play? Hollywood Brown, is he still good? Xavier Worthy, people don't like him because he was drafted in the first round. He's fast. That doesn't mean he's a bad pick just because he was fast and drafted in the first round. That's not the conclusion we need to be drawing from the John Rosses and all that.
Yeah, he was productive in college, even at an early age, drafted in the first round, super, super duper fast with a great quarterback. Let's fade him.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, he was already, before we knew how fast he was going to run, he was already expected to go in the late first round. Where did he go? In the late first round. His draft position, he didn't get driven up the draft board. He went right where he was supposed to go.
Right. Now, Kansas City, that's why he's up a few rounds on Underdog for sure, but it hasn't spiked, and even on FFPC places like that, the movement hasn't been as dramatic. And that's the thing. Exactly. If you go, like for example, everything I'm saying right now is all on Player Profiler. I went to DeAndre Swift and I looked up his contract tab, and I was able to give you all the details on his contract. Right now, I can go to the ADP tab on Xavier Worthy, and I can tell you that he's going at pick 87 in high stakes at the FFPC and pick 60 on Underdog. That's about the difference, right? There's about a 22-round difference between guys like Xavier Worthy on platforms like Underdog, where there's just people are chasing the heat a little bit more, and a place like the FFPC that's not as wide receiver centric. It's tight end premium. You start fewer wide receivers relative to running backs. And that the community of users, the people that are playing at the FFPC, they're a little more tempered with their expectations. They're a little less likely to, experience rookie fever. And so that's where you get, a bit of a chilling effect on a guy's ADP where you can get him at, 8th round. Hell yeah.
Yes, exactly. You're familiar with Fantasy Mojo, right? Darren Armani.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah. He calls it at the FFPC the Sizzler crowd. The guys who are at the buffet early, and they're a little more prone to draft the running backs, so that pushes running backs up a little bit, pushes the wide receivers down. So yeah, it's you kind of have to know your audience as to where you're at.
But look at a Josh Palmer, that's the audience that's going to appreciate a Josh Palmer, right?
Right.
Relative to a Ladd McConkey, right? So that's sort of a fascinating thing. So any other teams you think that have value?
Yeah, real quickly, Cincinnati running backs, because of the, Zach Moss and Chase Brown, one or both of these guys should be going higher. But it's the fact that we don't know that's driving the price of both of them down. So now is the time to grab into that backfield. Take both. I'm taking both. But, just get in there now, because sooner or later, one of them's going to probably shoot up. So I want to be in front of that. And then the Broncos, they're actually one of my favorite teams, because what if Bo Nix is actually good? They have a lot of interesting players. And I want to talk about Nix for a quick second, if I may. Out of the rookie quarterbacks, his deep ball on target percentage was second behind only Jaden Daniels. He has the highest on target percent overall. His interception rate is 0.06% or 0.6%, twice as good as any other rookie quarterback. The next closest is 1.2%. He has a 1.2% sack rate. Caleb, J.J. McCarthy, Daniels, May all range from 5.2 to 7.3% sack rates. I mean, what if he's good, Matt? What if he is?
It's possible. I've seen stranger things have happened.
I
just wouldn't bet on it, Dan. He's a rookie. He doesn't have great weapons. He doesn't have a great offensive line. He has an overrated coach, and a bunch of scouts passed on him for a lot of football reasons that we saw at the Senior Bowl that didn't manifest in the Pac-12. And when I see that guy go in that Brady Quinn zone, that Jake Locker zone of the draft, I get a little nervous. And then I look around and go, okay, where are the fantasy points going to get scored again? How exactly are they going to do this? Where's the playmaking going to happen? It's on Cortland Sutton's shoulders. Man, that's not been a great bet. So I can think of a couple guys. I can think of a Marvin Mims becomes very interesting, right? Because he's inexpensive. So if I look at the number one running back, if I look at a Javonte Williams, I'm like, well, he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. He's probably going to get more dump-off passes this year. That's cool, right? But they also have McLaughlin and other guys catching passes. So there's some argument there for a discount on a Dulcich, a discount on a Mims, where you could get like three guys in the back half of your draft that's where I could see some Broncos holding some value. Of all these guys, I think you like Mims, right?
Yeah, I like Mims. I like Dulcich. I do like Nix just because he's cheap. And that's the thing, is the price is what's driving me here. Because you do have, a quarterback that does fit this system very well. We don't know if he's good or not in the NFL. Maybe these stats will translate to the NFL. Maybe they won't. But I don't have to pay a big price to find out. I can find out for cheap. He can be my third quarterback. So I'm not, as invested in what happens with him. It's like it's all gravy if anything good happens. He's got, they've got a stable of running backs. Probably somebody is going to emerge from there. They've got a stable of wide receivers. Probably somebody is going to emerge from there. They've got a shootout schedule of Indianapolis, at the Chargers, at the Bengals. Nobody's scary there.
No.
So, it's one of those things where you look at the price, and every year there's one team that sort of shocks you. How are these guys good? Nobody expected them to be good. The fantasy community completely leaves them in the dust. They don't want anything to do with them. And, this year, I think that's Denver and that's the Patriots. And between the two, give me Denver.
I think it's more likely to be the team you said before, the Chargers, because, again, the fantasy community is out on the Chargers because of why? coach, right? The coach narrative. Okay, I don't want any part of Harbaugh. Harbaugh's old school. He's run first, right? He's defense oriented. This is not an offensive mind, even though he played quarterback, right? That's just a silly idea. They scored plenty of points in college, right? They won the championship. The national championship went to Michigan last time I checked. So the whole Harbaugh narrative is silliness to me. So that's where I think the Chargers are great. They actually have a proven stud quarterback in Herbert. And there's so many fun, interesting pieces, and there's a much higher probability of, I think, of a Drake May elevating everybody around him than a Bo Nix elevating everyone around him. Given all these teams were trying to trade up and get Drake May, and Bo Nix was the sort of consolation prize, and where Sean Payton's embittered that he couldn't get Penix, right, and that the league is conspiring against him, and now he's stuck with Nix. There's a reason why they feel this way, right? And that's part of the humble nature of what we have to do. Hey, I don't understand it. According to my stats, Nix looked great, but I've been, again, down this road enough times where I'm not going to get too far out over my skis on Nix and get too confident. I actually like the value, and I kind of like the potential, the upside, based on where I think the quarterback play could be elevated in Los Angeles and in New England more than Denver. Is that fair?
And there you go. That's the difference between you and I. And we see it a little bit differently. Totally fine. I like the fact that we do have that super cheap price on everyone in Denver. I mean, everyone. And you're right. You do in New England as well. I just trust the whole design of the offense a little bit less in New England.
I mean, in Los Angeles, we talked about Kamani Vidal.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. The Chargers
that's a fun team. That's a fun team. You're getting a bunch of Vidal late, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Not to poo-poo on the Chargers at all. I think they're a great team to be stacking up late as well. But I'm definitely in on Denver as well.
You think the Chargers will make the playoffs?
I mean, it's possible, but the AFC is pretty rough this year. I think the Chargers are they're probably going to have, kind of a year of limbo while Harbaugh gets his system installed. He kind of works through the roster, gets the players he wants, But Herbert, yeah, definitely a nice value. My big fade there is probably Gus. The touches got to go somewhere narrative. It's terrible. Terrible.
Oh, yeah, that's the road to hell.
Yes, it is.
That's the road to Mike Davis, I should say.
Right, exactly.
That's the road to Mike Davis in the 5th round. We've all learned that lesson. Again, we've tried to learn it with the Kyren Williams. It wasn't learned this year. At one point, he was going at the 1-2 turn. So again, these lessons don't get learned. Justin Forsett, they don't get learned. They refuse to learn, Dan.
They do.
And what about the Jaguars?
The edge is evergreen. The edge is evergreen, Matt.
Apparently, the Jaguars. Okay. What's the difference between their situation and the Chargers situation, except that the Chargers have a better quarterback?
Yeah, they do. I think, it is a little bit of a make or break year for him, especially for the coach, Doug Peterson. He had one season where he was 13-3. He had one season where he was 4-11-1. His 5 other seasons have been between 7 and 9 wins. The Super Bowl only goes so far, and I think he's starting to be exposed as a kind of a mediocre coach. And
he's a coordinator. He's an offensive coordinator. He's an Isn't it? Is this so hard to figure out? Frank Reich is an offensive coordinator. That's what his destiny of success is in the NFL. That's Doug Peterson. It's literally the Peter principle.
Yes. Exactly. And then he's saddled with Trevor Lawrence, who is not exactly the second coming of Peyton Manning, even though that's what he was rumored to be. But at this point, you got to take and look and see what we actually have. I think he's closer to discount Andrew Luck, who was another anointed chosen one, but who also got by mainly on volume. I'm not as big on Luck as a lot of people were. I always thought he was just pretty much volume driven. But Lawrence has got to take another step, or he's going to be Kirk Cousins. And that's not where you want to be, because when you're Kirk Cousins, you need a strong team around you, but your contract makes it really difficult to do. I think that the Jaguars, unless Trevor Law can take that step forward, that's going to be a real problem for him, because they're going to have to pay him. Are they going to pay him, or are they going to let him walk? I mean, it's hard to imagine them letting him walk. So when Lawrence, gets paid and he's getting 40 million or 45 million or whatever it's going to be a lot harder to put a team together around him. So that said, at his price, Lawrence is pretty nice this year. I don't mind him at all.
No, in fantasy, I don't mind him. I know some people from Jacksonville, and they're big Jaguars fans, and they really want me to give them the good news that they're a Super Bowl contender. And it's just one of those disconnects where they just feel like this guy is, a franchise quarterback. He's for real. This team has been building, and they're poised and all these things. And it's like, you may not make the playoffs, and then you're going to have a weird, difficult conversation about Trevor Lawrence.
Right. Exactly.
It's going to be very uncomfortable for Jags fans. I just feel bad for them, because they don't see it yet. None of them see it yet. I'm sure local sports radio, I haven't listened in yet, but I'm sure they are not realizing what's about to happen to them. And it's kind of like, if you understood where the real estate market was in 2007, and you were talking to someone at like an investment bank, and they were like, yeah, we're riding high. And you're like, well, I don't know.
Now, if only we could have seen that one coming. That would have been great.
Well, a few people did. A few people did.
They did.
Some people in fantasy and other that have seen Trevor Lawrence. Like, well, I don't think it's. And it's interesting. Like, if they struggle, then Travis Etienne becomes a fade, right? He becomes a fade, and where maybe you were better off just taking shots on a Bigsby or something. Like, is Bigsby one of those guys that you would draft late? Because the buzz is that he's a lot better this year.
Yeah, I'm always interested in taking a second shot on guys like that, especially when it's super cheap, like it is with Bigsby. Because the thing is, a lot of times we see running backs in their second year kind of put it together when they had a hard time doing it the first year. So, it's always worth buying in as long as you're not spending a whole lot to do it. I do like ETN a lot this year, just because he does catch passes. So, whether they're ahead, whether they're behind, he's going to be heavily involved. I like Ingram as well at tight end. I think he's a great buy. Everybody, because the problem is with Ingram, everybody got to hate him so much with the Giants for things that were not his fault. It was not his fault that the offensive plan did not use his strengths. It's not his fault that he had terrible quarterbacks, and then all of a sudden he goes to an offense, Jaguars, coached by Doug Peterson, who has a history of using the tight end and use him extensively. And people are like, no, I don't want to buy in. And this year you're hearing the same narrative, but now it's because, but look at these great receivers that they added. So Ingram's not going to get his targets anymore. Bull. That's not going to happen, because he's in a Peterson offense. He's always going to be featured, and he is a mismatch. And that's all you need to know.
Are you above or below market on Brian Thomas?
Definitely below.
I knew it. Oh, this is where we missed the GOAT district. Oh, you and Theo could have gone at it on that. That would have been good. So of all, I'm below. Yes, I'm one of those like, hey, I'll take Kirk and Ingram, and you guys can go have fun with Brian Thomas. So
or Gabe Davis.
Yeah. So of all the teams, have we named the team yet where you have the most fantasy assets you're drafting, or is there another team where you're loading up on everybody?
I don't know. I mean, I think Green Bay is probably one of the biggest ones. I'm pretty big into the 49ers as well. I don't love the ADPs I don't love the ADP on Ayuk at all, definitely. But everybody else is fairly palatable. So
Debo too? You're fine with the Debo ADP?
Yeah, I'm fine with Debo ADP because he's a guy that when he's playing, he generally gets some big spike weeks. I mean, he's the kind of guy you want to have on a best ball roster.
And Purdy's always a nice play. I mean, especially in best ball, he's going to give you some spike weeks with with the playmakers he has. That's the thing that gets overlooked when a Kirk Cousins is throwing to a Justin Jefferson, and especially if you have multiple like mega talents, and how many if you put Ayuk off to the side. The funny thing is, the highest drafted wide receiver, I wouldn't even consider a mega talent. I think Debo is more likely to break along, pass play. I think that George Kittle is more likely to break along pass play. But Ayuk is also super good and super electric. There's a reason why he's getting drafted in the second round. So when you stack playmakers on top of playmakers on top of playmakers, even a pocket passer is going to put up some 40-point weeks.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, last year, again, I almost rode a super stack of 49ers, to a giant win, life-changing money. And that's the kind of thing you want to have access to. And the Niners can give it to you because, you know what? Even if Ayuk has a terrible game, if you've got Debo and you've got Kittle and you've got Purdy, one of those guys is really going to go off. You don't need everybody in your lineup to go off every single week. That's kind of the misnomer. In best ball, maybe a little bit more, but in managed leagues, not so much because everybody is having to make start-sit decisions. So everybody has, they're going to have duds. And so if you're not exactly perfect, you're likely still good enough most weeks. And so it's okay to have a dud here and there. And when you're on San Francisco, that's an offense that can score a lot of points in a hurry.
Purdy Kittle backdoor stack, very cool, right? Very fun,
right? Yeah, and you can throw McCaffrey in there too. It's very easy to get at the 101. You can get McCaffrey, Kittle, and Purdy all together very easily. Excellent.
Bingo.
Stack.
That's right. How about the least amount of teams, where the least amount of players, where you're putting them on your fantasy teams? I mean, we mentioned a lot of bad teams already, but we're finding value late with the Broncos, with the Patriots, with the Chargers, for example. But is there anyone where you're not seeing much at all that's worth drafting?
The Steelers have been kind of a tough sell for me this year. And what kind of concerns me is the way that Arthur Smith has brought in all his usual, his favorite pet players, the Van Jeffersons and the Cordero Pattersons and all this kind of stuff. He's going to find a way to gum up the works. And, everybody's hot on Pickens, and I get that because Pickens is a great talent. But he's just not going to get the targets if Arthur Smith continues to run his offense the way he has in Tennessee and Atlanta. There's just not enough targets available. A.J. Brown was a superstar in waiting with Tennessee, but he was starved for targets. Drake London, we think, is a superstar in waiting with Atlanta, but he was starved for targets. Kyle Pitts, starved for targets. I don't like drafting guys high when they're starved for touches. And, the whole Najee and Jaylen Warren, that's probably where I'm buying in the most. I'm getting, a little bit of Pickens because I'm scared not to. But on the other hand, I'm not going to be anywhere close to even a weight on
Najee and Roman Wilson. And,
Roman's good.
Maybe some Freiermuth.
Yeah, right? Muth is good. Yeah.
I think those would be the three guys where I think you're right that the quarterbacks are tough, right? Because if you're like, oh, there's going to be some field starts. Okay, great. Okay, which weeks? Okay, maybe. Do you see people drafting both of them in managed leagues? Is that a thing?
Drafting both the quarterbacks?
Yeah, both Wilson and Fields. That's not a thing, right? That would have been a thing people were doing 5 years ago.
Now, basically, I think kind of the smart move if you want to get in on the Pittsburgh quarterback situation is take Justin Fields really late because you don't have to take him until about the last round or two. And, so that's a nice sneaky little dart throw, especially if you don't feel great about your quarterback situation. Just go ahead and throw him in there, leave him on your bench for, a few weeks and see what happens. Because like you said, I think there's a point where Fields is making some starts. Maybe it's right away. I don't know. But I would much rather have Fields than Russell Wilson. I just don't really have any interest in Russell Wilson unless I'm desperate down the line and the season's already going and he's one of the few quarterbacks available and he's still starting.
There's a Wilson I want on Pittsburgh, and his name is Roman. And
right, exactly.
We're going to get into 10 burning questions, and you told me to strap in for these. 10 burning questions with Dan Williamson after this. Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early Bestball leagues that start in February and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it! 10 burning questions. 10, Dan. You ready?
Let's do this. And why don't you give me the first two together? And it'll all be a tangled mess, but we'll just do it.
Okay. Rule of thumb to help fantasy managers. One single rule of thumb to help fantasy managers, and one lesson that you've learned in recent years.
All right. I got way more than one of each, but we'll go through and we'll see what you think. But I think those two questions are really woven together.
They are.
And I was fortunate enough to have some really good years with the Goat District podcast. And we made it our business to interview proven winners with skin in the game. And for me, it was about improving my game as much as helping our audience improve their game. When you have the mind of Mansion, Matt, you're not just interested in helping the listeners. I mean, that's your first goal, but you're also looking to get better yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no better way to do it than to talk to sharp people and, just absorb what they have to say. And, putting together what a lot of these people have said over the years, it really kind of crystallizes down to a few things. And I just want to just kind of quickly go through and share a few of them. So one of them is that projections are great, but it's a point on a curve, and the curve does not look the same for every player, right? Because so many things can happen during the season. So each player kind of has a curve of potential scoring possibilities over the year. Some are heavily weighted, like David Montgomery, towards a high floor, low ceiling. Some are heavily weighted towards a high ceiling, low floor. And then there's all sorts of shapes in between. And it's just as important to accurately gauge the shape of that curve as it is to have a projection somewhere along that curve. The projection is what we see as being the most likely, but in some cases, you can say, I have a lot of confidence in the projection. In other cases, you say, I don't really have that much confidence in the projection. The variance is what we're looking for. And if you can find outsized variance to the positive side, that's all you need, right?
That's right.
Point number 2, let others do the heavy lifting, okay? Building models is time consuming. I don't have time to build models. I'm out there drafting. I'm out there, trying to grind and just get better. And building a model, other people do this better than me. I am not the greatest statistician. I am not the greatest film watcher. I'm not, I let guys who are better at those things do those things, and they tell me about those things. And then I take advantage of that because they're out there sharing it. And we should all be very thankful to these people because they do put these things together. But that said, if you don't get dirty with the stats, you got no foundation and you're going to be a lemming. So you need to dive into the stats, but you don't need to build a model. You need to decide whether this model is useful to you or not. And if it is, use it. If it's not, don't. Because analytics are really a good guardrail, but the context is critical. You got to have both to succeed.
Was there any mistake that you've made recently or you were making in previous years that maybe at some point that you realized, okay, this is something I'm going to correct?
Yeah. So I would say that it's getting too involved or too deep into the analytics and just believing the numbers and not really looking into the context as much. To me, just letting the context tell me a little bit more, letting my gut reaction tell me a little bit more, that's done the most. Because that really, like the Jamar Chase thing, you got to know the context of what's going on. You've got to know the context of what's going on with DeAndre Swift or a David Montgomery. That's how you decide, no, Montgomery's not a player I want. DeAndre Swift is a player I want. So those are important things for sure. And a few other quick hitters. If you're into it, Matt, if you're not, just tell me, but
I'm in.
All right. Let's go.
But I will say, with the stats, you're falling for it with Bo Nix a little bit with the stats.
I am, but he's cheap. He's cheap. It doesn't cost me much to be wrong. That's a key.
We'll come back to Bo.
Right.
I'm looking forward to being wrong about Bo Nix. We're going to come back to this. We're going to during the season.
Right,
we're going to come back. Everyone write this down. Dan and Matt are going to come back about Bo Nix at some point and reconvene.
All right, that's fair enough. I'm into that. So, touches are attracted to talent like a magnet. Lack of talent repels touches like you would not believe. So, never buy into players that you don't believe are talented.
Like that's the Quentin Johnston corollary.
Yeah, Quentin Johnston corollary. The Alexander Madison corollary. I mean, you can name your players there. Be fearless when you're drafting. Draft every team like every decision is 100% correct. This is a big one that I've really gotten into the last 3 years.
Cool.
Hedge your bets across the drafts, not within the drafts. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't feel entirely comfortable owning 0% Kyren. I'm going to own 2%, something like that. But I'm definitely not taking Corum in any draft where I have Kyren. Unless, again, it's a managed league and Corum is super cheap. But in a best ball, no way. Because I want to bet, if I'm taking Corum or Kyren, I'm going to say, that's my guy. I think this is going to be the guy, and I'm going to move on. Because when you draft like you're 100% correct on every decision, yeah, you end up with more teams in 11th and 12th place, but you also end up with more teams in 1st and 2nd place. If you draft like you're not correct, you end up with a lot of teams in 3rd, 4th, 5th place, and maybe some of those will sneak into the, the first round of the playoffs or whatever, but they're not going to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, just say no to fearful drafting and handcuffing.
Right, exactly. You should, whatever your jam music is or whatever, when you're drafting, just get yourself psyched up, get comfortable, and just go at it, and say, yes, this move was right, and be excited about what you're drafting while you're drafting it. Don't sit there and, I know a lot of people are like, oh, this team's terrible. I feel like every pick has just been a real drag and I'm not getting the guys I wanted. Lean into what you do have. Make something out of it. You got to find a way to make something out of it every time, because you'd be surprised how many times you end up with a draft that you thought was going nowhere and it ends up being really, really good.
That's true.
Yes. Lean into your strengths as a drafter and evaluator. I'm not as good at wide receiver as I am at some of the other positions. So I favor more draft capital for wide receivers. I'm going to spend up and I'm going to get the more sure things at wide receiver because I feel a little bit better about running backs and tight ends. I feel great about tight ends. I'll dive to the bottom of the dumpster on tight end if I have to, if that allows me to shore up other positions. So, lean into your strengths. Don't, if you're not good at tight ends, go get yourself an elite one. That's the way to do it. Don't force yourself to be good at the things you're not good at. Be good at the things you're good at, and let the wisdom of the crowds help you out on the things you're not as good at.
Draft Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, Musgrave, he's a great, steady tight end. You can count on what you're getting from Luke Musgrave. He's not going to be an elite guy. He's not going to get you probably up to, Evan Ingram or, Laporta, any of that, just because he has so much target competition. I'm not going to say the words, too many,
No,
the
can't.
words. No.
I have a cliche alert if we do.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I'm fearful of that, Matt. I don't want the cliche alert. The noise scares me. Take risks though. Don't be a cookie cutter drafter. Like we know what patterns work, right? Zero RB works. Hero RB works. But don't be afraid to throw in a few robust RB drafts. Don't be afraid to throw in a couple of elite double tight end or elite double quarterback. Throw in a few other kinds of drafts because you never know what's going to work in a given year. And you don't want to be the guy who went total zero RB and this ended up being the 1 year out of 10 where it was better to be robust RB. Like all the early guys hit and some of the early wide receivers get injured. It doesn't happen often, but it can happen. So,
what's the beauty of a double elite tight end is you can do that with Kittle and Ingram and not have to pay.
Right, exactly. It's so nice. It's so nice. I have so much Kittle. I have so much Ingram.
There you go. And you can get them both.
Right, exactly. And then, another big lesson that I've learned in the past couple of years, don't get seduced by the sex appeal. FOMO and big sexy will kill your teams faster than anything else. If you go chasing those things, winning ugly pays the bills and it's an easier path. You want to find the ugly ducklings that will turn into in-season swans. Guys like Bo Nix, for example.
Of course. I was thinking on that one. I was thinking Christian Kirk versus Brian Thomas.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There are lots of players like that nobody really seems to want to have anything to do with, but you know what? They're actually going to be pretty good. They're actually going to play roles. Darnell Mooney, he's hanging out down there in, the mid to late teen rounds. What's up with that? He's going to have Kirk Cousins for his quarterback. He's going to have, Pitts and Bijan and Drake London. And you're saying, how can you get any targets? I'm like, I don't care how many targets he gets because you know what? He's going to be wide ass open every time.
Bombs. You don't like bombs?
Yes, exactly.
I like bombs. It's okay if the average target depth is 25 yards.
Yeah. It's the 14th, 15th round. What's he costing you if he doesn't work out?
No,
nothing. Yes.
Awesome.
There's nothing to worry about there.
Awesome.
And then on that note, I don't post too many draft boards anymore because you know what? You learn all the wrong lessons when you post your draft boards out on, X or anywhere else because everybody is looking for big sexy and they're going to tell you all the things that are wrong with your draft. And a lot of times they don't know anything more than you do, probably know less. So why even put it out there? I mean, it's just kind of a cheap little ego stroke that half the time goes wrong anyway because you don't get the comments you wanted.
Well, welcome to social media.
Yeah, exactly. So, just don't do it. Or if you do it, just do it for the laughs. Don't pay any attention to what people are telling you unless you hear something that really makes sense to you. If you get a comment that speaks to you, great. That's the only reason why I still post a few. And that leads into the next point. You want to have strong
before
opinions?
You get into that point, I want to make sure that we talk about something. It was reported that Elon Musk, when he was renaming Twitter, he had two choices, X or cheap little ego stroke, and he chose X. But it was close.
It was close. I get it. Cheap little ego stroke. It's got a certain ring to it.
It was really almost.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then this one I know I've heard for several years, and I definitely believe it. Have strong opinions, but hold them weakly. Humility is a great asset, especially in fantasy football. We're wrong a lot. I mean, fantasy football to me is about being wrong less than the other guy almost as much as it is about being right. I mean, you definitely need to catch those right players, but also, your teams do better if you catch a few of the right players and you're also wrong the least, to the point where you don't make big mistakes that totally shoot a hole in your team and make it impossible for it to advance. So I always try to keep an open mind and be ready to shift my lane, change my stance, whatever, because if somebody can give me a reason, like you, Matt, talking about Bo Nix, one of the things it's telling me is, maybe I should be mixing in a little more Drake May. You got a good point about Drake May. I should probably be sliding in a little bit more Drake May in my drafts. So I'm learning something there. Not going to stop drafting Bo Nix, not going to stop drafting those Broncos, but I might dial it back a twinge.
No, because there are other, like these backdoor stacks, there's other options that are just as good. Maybe.
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah.
The season is yet to play out. We don't know what's going to happen.
Opportunity cost. That's exactly what it is. When you do the Denver stack, you're saying no to, probably the Patriots stack. So
that's right.
But until
that's the thing.
Until you've been moved off an opinion, though, maximize those places where you differ from the herd. Because if you're going to win, that's how you're going to win. You're not going to win by following the herd 100%. You'll do a good job of coming in, third, fourth, fifth place, but you're not going to come in first nearly often enough until you are following your own takes and maximizing places where you have a difference of opinion.
What is the most common roster build that you're executing this year? Is it Hero RB? Is it something else?
I've been leaning mostly to Zero RB and Hero RB. To be honest, the running back value from the mid-fifth through the 10th round right now is it's insane. And
it's insane. Right?
Right. Why would you not take advantage of that?
Yeah, I mean, Zero RB, man. Hero RB, very popular. Zero RB, less so, especially in managed leagues and redraft. But I like what you're saying, man. Like I think this is a great year for Zero RB, and if you're saying it too, that's super validating.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just so many guys who have fairly secure roles from the mid-fifth through the 10th. Everybody's pushing the wide receivers up, so it's not really costing you anything to follow the crowd there, and go ahead and grab your elite wide receivers right away. Because the running backs are going to be there for you. The quarterbacks are going to be there for you. Even the tight ends will be there for you. So, you can load up, and, I do try to mix in, a different player here and there, but I'm mostly loading up on Zero and Hero.
That's great. What rookies do you think are the best values in drafts right now?
At tight end, give me Brock Bowers. He's tight end 11. He's, take a look at that Las Vegas offense. He's got Devontae Adams providing some cover. He's got, Jacoby Myers. He's got probably going to have decent quarterback play. I think it'll be Gardner Minshew. Might be Aiden O'Connell, but I think it'll probably be Gardner Minshew. They're going to have a solid offense. They drafted him really highly. I don't think he's foolproof, but the thing is, you're not having to pay the price like you had to pay with Pitts when he first came out.
No.
People got burnt by Pitts, and so they're not buying in as heavily to Bowers. When you can get him at tight end 11, you've really taken most of the risk right out of it, because you know what? He's going he's going at 101, ADP 101 overall. So it's not like you burned an early pick on him. So easy there. Same thing, Jaden Daniels, quarterback 12, ADP 104. Easy. I mean, if he plays all year, he's going to be a top 6 quarterback.
Those are two of the players where I was looking at the rookie ADPs on Underdog, and I was like, why isn't Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers going earlier?
It's sickening how much Jaden Daniels I have.
Yeah, right.
It's almost a little scary.
Don't be scared, man.
Yeah, exactly. Again, until you've been moved off an opinion, maximize those places where you differ from the herd.
You're not going to get a move off from me, man. You're not going to get any, no objections.
You're not calling him Bo Nix then.
Oh no, I love Terry McLaurin. He's a guy I just think is a phenomenal all-purpose wide receiver that's finally gonna get the credit he deserves this year. It's just I think Brian Robinson's undervalued. I mean, it's up and down the board. It's Dotson's a value late. I mean, come on, man.
And even if you don't like drafting rookie tight ends, just go ahead and take Zach Ertz, because all you have to do is take a look at Zach Ertz in Arizona with Cliff Kingsbury until he got hurt in 2022.
There you go.
It's absolutely amazing.
Okay.
He was used. All right.
One more. Give us one more.
Blake Corum. ADP 124, running back 39. I mean, how can I not have him in this list?
How could you not? It's a requirement, right? That's the
right.
The balance of the universe. If Kyren Williams is going to be overvalued, then necessarily Blake Corum is going to be undervalued.
That's right. Exactly.
It's too easy, man. Sometimes fantasy football doesn't have to be hard, right? You could just don't ask questions. Don't ask too many questions. Hey, we can't explain why the enthusiasm around this player exists. We're not going to spend too much time trying to explain it. We're just going to exploit it. The way to exploit it is Corum.
Right, exactly. That and the fact that you made me sign a contract that said I would say Blake Corum's name 37 times while I was on the podcast.
That's right. That's part of the contract. And
exactly.
You have to fade Kyren Williams. Yes. There's an agenda here. Absolutely. Okay.
Totally.
I got another question. Because there's buzz around these two guys right now, and they're not the number one. They're not the number two on their team. They have a mobile quarterback, so there's not going to be that many pass attempts and targets to go around. But who is going to have more fantasy points this year? Adonai Mitchell or Jelani Woods?
It's pretty easily Mitchell for me because, Indianapolis has, I think 37 tight ends on the roster right now. So I don't know. They have a lot of guys who I think have some promise, and none of them have really paid off yet. I mean, I'm going to take some shots on Jelani. Don't get me wrong, because
Jelani Woods. If you're trying to pick a tight end that could break out, Jelani Woods, right. Basketball player, big, athletic. There's completely wide open depth chart at tight end there in Indianapolis. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting question.
It is, but if I'm going to have to, if I had to bet the mortgage on it, it would be Ad Mitchell.
Where do you consider the running back dead zone this year?
I had a hard time with this one because I don't really worry about dead zones. I mean, I look at every player as kind of a discrete person. But if I had to pick one, I'd say picks 25 to 55 is probably the dead zone. I'll take King Henry in there. I'll take ETN in there, but I'll be way under on Kyren, probably somewhat under on Jacobs, Pacheco, and Cook. I'll be under on them. So that's as close as I can find to a dead zone.
So you're under on Pacheco?
Yeah, I am, just because he's another guy who, he's not like David Montgomery, but his ceiling I don't think is quite as high as what I want it to be where I have to take him. The opportunity cost on Pacheco is really what keeps me from drafting. It's not anything I don't like about Pacheco. It's just the opportunity cost. There are players I like better that are available around him.
So we've talked about a couple handcuff running backs. We talked about Dylan Lobby, potentially. He's a 6th-round pick. Much as I love his profile, it's a long shot, right? We talked about Roschon Johnson, potentially. Give us, say, 3 more running backs that could be this year's Kyren Williams.
All right. We'll start with, let's go with Blake Corum.
Okay, so Blake Corum we've talked about. Okay, there's one. Give us 2 more.
All right. I'm going to give you 3 more. Kamani Vidal, I think is a an excellent pick.
Bang.
Because we already talked about Gus Edwards, and we don't need to talk about J.K. Dobbins.
Poor J.K. Dobbins, man. What a shame.
Poor J.K. Dobbins, no doubt.
What a shame, man.
It's terrible. He's one of those guys that you just, man, you wonder what if that guy's tendons had been able to keep up with what he wanted to do, it would have been amazing. Trey Benson, possibly, but he's, part of the thing is these guys are going quite a bit earlier, except for Vidal, than Kyren Williams was last year. I mean, Kyren was barely getting drafted.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Started. Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, Trey Benson doesn't really count.
Exactly. So, Vidal is one of them. I'll throw out, as guys who are getting drafted really late. Dylan Labe would be one. Isaac Garendo.
Okay.
You need the injury or something to happen to CMC.
Some people have said Kendre Miller.
Yeah, again, he's going too early.
Okay. All right.
So
otherwise I'd have thrown Kendre Miller, but you agree Kendre Miller is a good handcuff.
Yeah, he's a good handcuff. If we're talking about good handcuffs, definitely. Another one that I think is a lot of fun. What about Rico Dowdle? Makes me a little bit nervous because of the, I'm not sure exactly how talented he is, but I'll tell you what, he's looked fairly decent in at least small sample sizes. And we know what Zeke is. I mean, Zeke can still get you his 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He can still pass block relatively well. He can still at least catch the ball and fall forwards. Mm-hmm. He knows how to fall into the goal line. But you know what? If there's anybody who's got, Tony Pollard juice on this team, it's probably Dowdle.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. I like that. And he's going to have a role right away. He has standalone value right away. It's kind of cool.
Yes, definitely.
Now, looking at late-round wide receivers, we talked about Mooney. Give us a few more late-round wide receivers you like.
Okay, so as far as semi-deep guys, I mean, Dontavian Wicks, X has been all about him lately, but he's still not really moving up that far in drafts.
No.
And, he's kind of the, the contrarian play in the Green Bay offense because, you can get him rounds cheaper than the other guys, and he could supplant any one of them. He can play outside. He can play inside. I think he will play outside more than anything. So, but if Christian Watson's hamstrings act up again, boom, there goes Wicks. If Romeo Doubs just really isn't as good as Wicks could pass him.
So Doubs is not good.
Yeah, exactly. He looked great in the playoffs, but I think that was more of a false flag than anything.
That's what, fade the false flag.
Yes, because, the thing is, San Francisco is like, yeah, this is the guy if you want to try to beat us with Romeo Doubs, go ahead, be my guest. We want to protect against getting beat by the other guys. So, yeah, I think Wicks is great. Palmer, we already talked about.
I forgot already. Jeez, man, I already forgot we talked about Palmer. Yes.
Yes.
So if you said the Green Bay pass attack, that the target distribution is going to be Jaden Reed and then Dontavian Wicks, you wouldn't be surprised at all.
No, not at all.
Right.
No.
Good.
Darnell Mooney, talked about him as well. But, I mean, what a great situation he's in that offense. And, if something happens to any of the other receivers, he moves up a notch. So, he probably gets less efficient, but more targets. So, he's got multiple paths as well as just right where he's at. Right where he's at, I think, is a good enough path for him. Now, super deep?
Yeah.
Super deep. All right, let's get down there. Greg Dortch, I know he's been kind of a darling on Twitter the past couple days, but he's a really good receiver. He's going to have a role in that offense, playing in the slot. So I see Dortch as being a guy that you can throw in there in your last rounds of a best ball draft. You can throw in there in your last rounds of redraft. He's probably going to be equally useful either place. Darius Slayton, the Giants.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know. Ugh. But again, look at who they've got. They've got Wan'Dale Robinson, who's great, but he's a Smurf, and it's gonna be pretty quick that he gets hurt running across the middle, like he is. And of course, Neighbors is going to draw the big coverage, and then you've got Hyatt and Slayton. And between the two, give me Slayton. Slayton has shown me something in this league. Hyatt hasn't.
That's right.
Slayton
well, that's a good point. Yeah, definitely Slayton as the sort of a arbitrage on Hyatt, not because Hyatt's not good either. Hyatt's like a faster Romeo Dobbs.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, Slayton has actually had some good games. He's had terrible quarterback play pretty much his entire career.
Sure.
So, not much changes on that this year, unfortunately. But, honestly, we're talking about late round darts and, guys who can come out there and give you a 15-point plus week 3 times a year. I think he's definitely one of those guys.
Now, I do like Tyrone Tracy on the Giants, but the buzz is around Eric Gray.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at guys that really flame out in their rookie year and then they come back and then there's not a lot of touch competition and then the team is just better than expected and they end up getting all the touches and the rookie's just not ready.
Yeah, there you go. This
Eric
year's Kyren
Gray
Williams.
could be this year's Kyren Williams.
There it is. Yeah. I can sign off on that. I think that's good. I like it.
It's very possible. The trash man from Roster Watch has been touting Eric Gray. And so right there, I was like, man, I want to mock this and laugh at this because we're Team Tyrone Tracy. But again,
yeah,
I've seen this movie before with these day 3 picks at running back. You want them to translate immediately, and they take a year. That's just what happens, and that's what happened with Eric Gray. Eric Gray, people liked him last year. They're like, oh, this guy's quick. He catches passes at Oklahoma. He's an interesting, fun player. And then he doesn't produce, and he's forgotten about. But he could easily just dedicate himself to the sport in a big way in the offseason. And it's such a low bar to be better than Devin Singletary.
Yeah. I mean, Singletary was all right for Houston, but I think that was mostly a function of the scheme. And people were more terrified of C.J. Stroud beating him than, Devin Singletary.
Right.
So, all right, 2 more really quick late round wide receivers.
More, yes, more receivers.
Yeah. Tyler Boyd goes and joins his old offensive coordinator in Tennessee. Calvin Ridley, definitely there are concerns about him. There's concerns about Nuke as well. So, why not Boyd? And it's not like Treylon Burks has, exactly risen up and seized the job there. So he could be your slot wide receiver, and he could be used pretty heavily.
Yeah, Burks overrated, Calvin Ridley overrated, DeAndre Hopkins now in his 30s, well into his 30s. Who's left?
Right, exactly. And then A.T. Perry with New Orleans.
There it is. There he is. Woo! Quick, this thing to work. Woo! Breakout alert. Yes, A.T. Perry. Yes.
Yeah, liked him coming out as a rookie last year. And
he should change the name on the back. Perry is a boring name. How about professional wide receiver? That's what he should put on the back of his jersey.
That would work. Yeah, for sure. Professional wide receiver. And, he fills a role on the offense that nobody else really is. So, got to like him.
I love that. What about late round tight ends? Give us one late round tight end. We've talked about a few. Give us one more.
All right. Noah Fant is probably my favorite. Yeah.
Guys break out at age 27 at the tight end position all the time. They go to their second team, and they take some time, whether it be Greg Olsen, whether it be Martellus Bennett. You can go to Gary Barnidge. There's been so many examples of this. Why not Noah Fant? The guy has athleticism for days.
He started to break out as a Bronco, and then they got traded over to the Seahawks, where he got in that stupid 3-man tight end rotation that was like the worst thing possible for any tight end. And he got treated like he was exactly Will Dissly or Colby Parkinson, which is so totally not the case. So I'm interested to see how he does when he has a job pretty much to himself this year. And, you have to wonder how much longer can Tyler Lockett keep going. Is JSN very good or not? These are questions we don't know.
Do you have an opinion about JSN? Are you drafting JSN?
I'm taking some for sure. I think if he's good, he's undervalued, no doubt about it. I'm just worried about how many targets are going to be available in that offense for each of the wide receivers. I don't know how that offense is going to look. We got a guy college. It's a very murky situation. So
just go with the tight end in that situation. So if it's all murky, get the tight end.
Exactly. Yep. Hunter Henry, definitely big on him because you know what? He could be the second biggest target in New England for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Greg Dulcich, we talked about him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Daniel Bellinger. I mean, assuming, Darren Waller retires, why not?
He did. Darren Waller did retire.
Oh, did he? Did he retire today?
Yeah, that's breaking news. Darren Waller has retired. We should break that news right here.
Well, there we go. Let's do it.
Yeah,
break that news.
Yeah, we have it. I know we have it. Darren Waller has retired.
There we go. Yes, draft Daniel Bellinger. This even opens up things for the very late play on Theo Johnson, but you probably want Bellinger.
Theo Greminger is going to like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like Johnson as a prospect, but again, it's a little bit tough sometimes for rookie tight ends. So I'll be taking Bellinger until training camp starts off, and we see how they're using Theo Johnson. So, and then Hayden Hurst. I mean, we're talking about the Chargers all.
Oh, the chat knew you were going to mention Hayden Hurst.
There we go. Yes, got to have some Hayden Hurst.
Are you who are you a truther for Hayden Hurst? Who would you say you're the biggest truther for in terms of these veterans that are sticking around?
Honestly, it's probably Noah Fant. I mean, I really think he just needs the right environment to explode. I mean, I've loved the talent. I've loved everything about him. He looks really good on the field, and
he's great after the catch.
Yes,
I love tight ends that are great after the catch. That's him.
Exactly.
Yeah, breakaway speed after the catch.
Evan Ingram, he's on the Evan Ingram career path. I was a little disappointed that he re-signed with Seattle. I was hoping he would go somewhere like Cincinnati. Can you imagine him in Cincinnati?
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Oh my God!
Oh man, that's a great take. That's a great front office take right there.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, I'll get you out of here, man. You've been great. Bold prediction.
All right, here we go. Jalen Wright outscores both Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert in 2024. Bold.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.